What is it that we do in FPAN?
The question my parents have for me.
Yeah, it's actually a little difficult to explain.
It really is.
Welcome to Archaeology Books for Fun, digging books that aren't drier than dirt. I'm your host, Tristan Herenstein, and with me as always is my co-host, Barbara Clark.
Hello, everybody.
And today we are doing something a little different from our usual episode, since it is the new year and we had the holidays and we were very busy. We simply could not get ourselves to read the next section of our book in time. So we are going to do a little interlude talking about the work we do and things we are looking forward to for the next year.
Yeah.
Before we get into that, we love sharing archaeology and the past with you. And if you want to help us reach other people, please leave us a like, comment, subscribe, review, whatever's appropriate for your platform. If you want to support us even further, you will also find a donation link in the episode description. And before we get into our regular discussion here, we have a comment from StingrayTom. It's quite a long comment, so I'm not going to read the whole thing here today, but he basically says he really liked one of our episodes on the Florida's famous Key Marco cat, which is a book that we enjoyed talking about specifically. He liked that, it's about Florida history. And I'm not, like I said, I'm not going to read the whole thing, but one of the things that stood out to me here was that he especially appreciated our discussion of the value of artifacts beyond monetary value, which if you've listened to us a while, that's definitely something we've covered before.
We definitely hark on that.
A few times. And we've actually covered a few books. So if that is a concept, we can certainly talk about it again. But if you want to hear us talk about it, I'd recommend in particular Stealing History was one where we talked about that a lot. Even though we had lots of issues with the book, Finders Keepers definitely dealt with this concept quite a bit too.
Yeah.
Our issues were not with
the concept.
that concept.
Right.
There was other concepts.
Right. Okay,
with.
yeah, that's fair.
But yeah. So yeah, thank you, StingrayTom, for the comment. Actually, if you all like history, we definitely recommend checking out StingrayTom's channel. He has a channel on YouTube here, and he does a lot of very good deep dives into different aspects of Florida history specifically. Now, I know some of our listeners are not from Florida, but I still recommend giving us a check out, because as we've talked about before, it's interesting the simple or smaller subjects and how interesting they can be.
And let's face it, everybody loves to learn about how weird Florida is, and he covers some of that weirdness.
He very much does. He's got several on Disney. He likes to highlight local kind of quirky museums. Like there's one recently that was all about the Mineral Museum.
He did one on, I always used to see billboards on I-75 for this place. It's like some little local chalet inn that was family owned, and they have a romaine soup recipe, and he goes into depth about the romaine soup recipe. But I can remember seeing billboards as a kid promoting this romaine soup, and I was always like, that sounds so weird. But he goes into that and tries to recreate the recipe. It's a lot of fun.
Yeah, and one thing that stood out to us in particular, because it actually is in our region, is he did a very nice episode about the Battle of Olustee.
Oh yeah, that was the first video I saw, and he does a really good job of talking about that.
Yep, essentially Olustee is the largest American Civil War battle in Florida. It was a Confederate victory, and the episode is about how many of the Union troops that died because the Union had to abandon them, they were not cared for properly and still are not cared for properly. And he does a good interview with a professor who is trying to get that fixed.
Yeah.
Very well done. That is actually one thing that stood out to me too, is some very nice interviews with people on these episodes too, and not just him talking.
Yeah, so, definitely be sure to check out his YouTube channel. Like we always say, there's a lot of really bad information out there on the internet when it comes to history and archaeology, and this is one where the information seems reliable and well researched and well done.
Yep, and so check the podcast episode description, and I will add links in that to the channel.
Perfect.
So, Barbara, Barbara, it's a new year.
Yay, I guess.
What are some things you're looking forward to in this year for our work? Well, actually, let's talk very briefly for those who aren't familiar. What is it that we do in FPAN?
The question my parents have for me.
Yeah, it's actually a little difficult to explain because Barbara and I are archaeologists, but we don't anymore do the digging and the field work people often imagine archaeologists are doing. What we are doing instead is archaeology, history, and science education. So I like to tell people, think of like Neil Tyson or Carl Sagan, and what they do for astronomy is kind of what we're doing for archaeology.
Right. We strive to be that cool.
Right. It's an ongoing effort.
Right.
But so we would do programs with kids, we do programs with adults, we do trainings, we do workshops, all kinds of different things. We do a podcast, of course, like, subscribe, and comment. And yeah, so that takes many different forms and kind of exactly what we do. And so we have some ongoing projects that are coming up this year that we're very excited for. We just thought we'd take a little time to talk about what's coming up this year.
Yeah. Well,
so Barbara, what do we got coming up this year?
Well, to answer your question, there's a couple things I'm really excited about. First, I'm really excited that we'll be going to the Society for Historical Archaeology conference in just a couple days when this is released. And I'm going to be presenting on a little project that I've been working on with the Florida Trust for Historic Preservation on nature journaling. The point being, well, number one, giving people a new excuse to go out and visit historic sites and historic landscapes, but also for all of us professionals that go out to these areas and the first thing we want to do is fix everything and we don't actually take time to just sit and kind of soak it all in, enjoy it. This gives folks like us a reason to go to these places and actually enjoy them as just a member of the public, not a professional. So I'm going to be working with the National Trust or the Florida Trust to kind of get that going and do some nature journaling meetups with folks and just let us be present and in the moment. And I think, especially after the holiday season, I feel like I can use that.
Yeah.
So that is something I'm very excited about.
And we did do a trial run of this last spring, and I think it went very well.
It went super well. I was really, really excited to see how many people showed up. I wasn't sure. I didn't know that there were so many people that were wanting to do nature journaling, knew what nature journaling was, and it just seems like it's something that maybe people need and want. And I think to be able to provide that and also promote visitation to historic sites is just an awesome thing to be able to do.
One thing I'm real excited about, and this is not a brand new project for me, it's something I've been kind of working towards this year, is in our section, we are in the north central region of FPAN. We have a lot of rural area, and all these small towns have local museums. And we cover 14 counties in total. So that's a lot of towns and such. And these little museums are great. They're part of their community, but they are all struggling. And so one of the things that I am working to do is actually utilize our programming and our knowledge and our connections to find ways of supporting these museums and the good work that they're doing. And so that's a variety of things that we're trying to do for them. But one of the things I'm excited about in particular is 3D printing. A lot of these museums have trouble getting access to quality artifacts to show people that have provenience. And you've heard us talk about how important context is. And so they have trouble getting access to these artifacts that have, we know where they came from, what have a story to tell. And that's a variety of reasons. Part of it is just they don't have the facilities for it. That's a lot of it. They don't have facilities for it. But also, even if they do, they can't touch it. So we can actually very cheaply print them copies of artifacts that they can have in their museum, and people can touch them, they can interact with them. And I think there's a lot of potential for helping them enhance their reach to their audience through this technology in particular.
And I think it being something that people can hold and touch will be really useful for a variety of reasons. Number one, you can't do that in a museum usually. And number two, for those that may have visual impairment or other, needs, being able to touch and hold something helps them kind of connect with it better.
And it helps everyone connect with it better, really, even though we know it's not the real thing, right? It's not going to weigh as much as the real thing typically and and it's not meant to fool anybody.
Right.
But you can still turn it around and look at it in ways you can't with a photograph, or even if it's sitting on a shelf, like you can't see all sides of it. So there's a lot of a possibility here, and I'm already getting some good responses. This year already, I have done a few prints for a museum here in Tallahassee, and then I have spoken to some outside of Tallahassee that also have expressed interest.
I feel like a lot of them are really excited about it.
Yeah.
And also, like, if you live in an area that has a local historical society museum, or you're on vacation and see a local historical society museum, pop in and visit. It makes a world of difference to them, and it's a great way to learn about local history.
And it's always a good thing, too, because I know a lot of people will go to, like, Florida for the beaches and stuff. But Florida has bad weather. And if you're ever looking for, like, something to do on a bad weather day, that's a great option. Just come in for a couple hours and check out their exhibits and stuff.
That's true.
And they'll be happy to talk to you.
That's definitely.
All right. What else have we got going on, Barbara? I think we got maybe one more thing to talk about today.
Well, I have actually two things. I'll talk about them briefly.
2 things.
Yeah. So I'm really excited for our cemetery resource protection training, or CRIPT conference, which we will be hosting in a rural community.
Yes.
In Monticello, Florida. Monticello. Yes, I'm saying that correctly. Don't
That's how
come
you
at
say it
me.
locally. Yes.
But it's a cemetery preservation conference, essentially, and we're going to be partnering with the Division of Historical Resources and their Historic Cemetery program, talking about the grants that they provide, the National Register of Historic Places. We're also going to be having some locals and folks from around the state talk about their cemetery projects that they are working on. And then we're going to be going out into one of the historic cemeteries in that community and doing some hands-on stuff. And I'm really excited because one of our colleagues, Nigel, will be coming out, and he's going to be talking about historic brick, because a lot of times you find a lot of that in historic cemeteries, and this one has an abundance, and just kind of what to do with it, how to properly care for it, things like that. So it's going to be a fun 2 days, I think. And Monticello is just a really fun place to host the conference. It's going to be in the Historic Opera House, which is really cute. I'm excited. So I think that will be fun. And then our amazing graduate assistants in Pensacola, of which Tristan used to be one.
I am an alum of that program, yes.
They came to myself and our executive director, and they had heard about a program that some of our other regions have done called an Archaeology Boot Camp, which is just a 3-day kind of crash course, essentially, in archaeology methodology. How do we find sites? What do we do when we find them? How do we process the data? Kind of just the quick and dirty basic. It's a very intense 3 days, but it's a lot of fun. And it's a good opportunity for especially students who are like, I think I want to be an archaeologist, but I'm not sure, to kind of get their feet wet, see what it's all about. It's also a great opportunity for members of the public who are interested in it. It's not as big a commitment as field school and not as expensive. So it's less of a risk that you're going to go to, like, if you went to field school for 6 weeks and then you're like, wait, I don't want to do this. You've put a lot of time, effort, and money into realizing you don't want to do that. But so our interns came to us and were like, hey, this is a really cool program. Can we bring this to Pensacola? And we were like, of course you can. So this has really been a project that has been planned and led by our graduate assistants, and they are just kind of taking the lead. And this will be over spring break in March. So I'm really excited to see how it turns out. They're super enthusiastic. I keep asking them, like, are you guys feeling overworked? Do you guys need any help? And they're like, no, we got this. So yeah. And is this, I know sometimes these kinds of programs are meant to replace field school for people who would find it difficult to do field school. Is that what this is? Or is it just a kind of a introduction to these things? It's more of an introduction. I mean, it technically can't replace field school, I don't believe, because it wouldn't qualify for like your RPA, your Register of Professional Archaeologists credentials, but you can put it on a resume, say you done it. If you're applying to grad school, I I feel like it would be a really, really good thing to note because it shows that you've already kind of gotten an understanding of what you're getting into.
And is this open to the general public?
I believe so, yes.
Okay,
yes,
so if you're in the area and you're interested, want to give it a go.
Yeah, and I'm hoping, we're still working out the details, but I'm hoping we can get even some funding for hotel rooms for people that may be far away. So if you're a student in another university that's interested, reach out to us.
Or high school students.
Yeah.
Honestly,
Yeah.
I think that'd be great to have some high school students there if they wanted to come.
Yeah, I'm really excited about it. I know our graduate assistants are just super enthusiastic about it. So it's really cool to see.
Okay, I think that's enough for this episode. We will once again be returning to our regular pattern next episode with a new book. What book is that, Barbara?
So, if you know anything about me, I'm super excited about this one. It's titled Hoof Beats, How Horses Shaped Human History, and it was written by William Taylor. I cannot wait, Tristan. I think it's going to be a cool book. And I think it'll tie in nicely with other books we've read, especially our last book.
I'm actually very curious if we're going to hear anything about the Scythians or the Xiongnu in this.
Ooh, yeah.
Because that'd be fun if they tied in because they were so critical, and the Scythians in particular are responsible for developing some of the early horse tack technology.
Yeah.
It seems like, so that'd be kind of cool.
Yeah. So I'm really excited. It seems that it kind of talks about various cultures. So I would be surprised if it doesn't, but that will be something we'll just have to discuss later.
Yeah, I'm very interested in this too. I'm not a horse person, nearly on the level Barbara is at least, but horses are so important to our cultures that it'll be interesting to see kind of how they shaped and how that relationship formed. I've noticed that the more names we have for animals at different stages in their life is an indicator of how important they are.
Yeah, yeah.
And horses have a ton of those.
Yes.
So that just tells us a lot right there.
Right.
That's just in the English language, of course, but still.
Yeah, and I think from what little I do know right now, there's been whole cultures that have changed and adapted for horse use when they were introduced to horses. And I'm just really excited. And I'll try and keep my horse girl enthusiasm to a minimum, Tristan.
That's all right. You can go for it. Just as long as we don't run too long. I have to do all the editing, remember?
You're going to have to put me on a timer.
Or we'll just have like a special episode of just you rambling about horses for an hour and a half or something.
Oh, I'm sure people would love that.
Unedited. Just let her go. All right. I think that wraps us up this time. Look forward to our next book, and we'll see you all in the future.
Happy reading, everybody.
Archaeology Books for Fun is brought to you by the Florida Public Archaeology Network, a program of the University of West Florida. You can find out more about archaeology and about FPAN at fpan.us. We appreciate any feedback, so if you're listening to us as a podcast, please leave us a review, and if you're watching this on YouTube, please like and subscribe. Thanks for listening.